Hey there, listeners. Welcome back to the Brand Marketing Show. Kath Langman here. And today's episode is one that I've been wanting to record for a while. Well, a couple of weeks anyway, because there's something that happened about 3 weeks ago that I think is genuinely one of the biggest shifts in e-commerce in years. And I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't really been talked about in a big way yet online. Not that I've observed anywhere so far. Now, before we get into it, I'm going to start with something a little bit different. I'm going to tell you about three things that I personally searched for online this month, not for work, but just in my everyday life, because I think this is going to be a really quick way to illustrate what I'm going to be talking about today. So the first search went like this. About 3 weeks ago, my eldest son, Aidan, who, as many of you listeners know, is an elite swimmer, came down with influenza right before heading to compete at the Australian Swimming Championships, which is not ideal timing, as you can imagine. So I did what any modern time poor person does. I opened up ChatGPT and I typed something like, what are the most effective supplements to help an elite swimmer recover from influenza? And what came back was a very detailed, specific answer. Might even just read it to you. For an elite swimmer recovering from influenza, the most effective supplements focus on reducing symptom duration, replenishing depleted immune cells, and supporting the return to training with zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, glutamine, and probiotics having the strongest evidence base. Because of the high risk of WADA prohibited, I can never remember what that stands for. It's like World Athlete Drug something or other or something like that. But, not allowed to take prohibited substances, obviously. So because of the high risk of prohibited substances in supplements, it's crucial to use products certified by third-party testing, etc., etc. Anyway, so, and then there were some brand recommendations as well. And it was not a list of, it wasn't like going on to Google and you see that kind of shopping feed at the top with specific products that you can just buy straight away. It was, very, very specific advice, as I just read to you, and with very specific reasoning for why these things would be appropriate for someone in serious athletic training and competition. And every single brand that appeared in that search had something in common. ChatGPT could find them, verify them, and trust them enough to recommend them. And a lot of that was coming down to a lot of the content that was also coming up. So not just specific products, but experts in that kind of athletic space that had been publishing content and talking about things, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so many supplement brands, probably one of the, it'd have to be one of the most competitive product categories, I would say. But a lot of these really well-known ones in Australia, including some that would be genuinely excellent, that we know personally and use here, they just simply didn't exist in the answer. And it wasn't because their products weren't good enough or that they didn't meet the testing requirements for athletes or anything like that. It was because they hadn't built the kind of digital footprint that AI can actually read, cite, and trust. What's actually interesting is if you have a look at the Google's AI citations as well that come up when you go to Google these days, and then kind of scroll down, you see a lot that appears way before any kind of product, like, even down to Reddit discussions. Anyway, that's a digression. My second search was a little bit, maybe slightly personally embarrassing. I was looking for the best under eye concealer or color corrector for mature sensitive skin, which is me. We all have our loud vanity moments, I'm sure. This was mine. I have genetically bad dark circles, and all my siblings have the same. It's really annoying, especially when you're on Zoom all day long and you have to look at your own appearance. Anywho, So again, I asked ChatGPT, and again, I got very specific brand recommendations with specific reasons. And, again, this is a product category that is very crowded, very competitive, and full of really premium brands with genuinely good products. The ones that surfaced were the ones with the real authority in the beauty and skincare space, and they have really credible content, AI readable data, and a genuine digital footprint. And it's not just brand published content, right? The ones without all of that, they're not even in the conversation, which was kind of disappointing and annoying because I remember a few months back seeing an ad. Maybe if I mention this now out loud, Meta platforms will hear me, but I just remember seeing an ad some time back for a brand that I'd never come across before. And I was really trying to find it because I thought, that'd probably work better than what I've been using. Anywho, search number three was very local and different to the other two. And I think it's kind of, potentially one of the most interesting of the three. So I was trying to find where to buy Fluorio Peninsula lactose-free milk in Adelaide for the best price. And I was doing this search for my 85-year-old mum who's been told by her doctors that she needs to put on weight and she needs to uh, ingest a whole lot more calories. So full cream milk for a lactose-free person like herself is necessary. Anyway, hyper specific, right? Very, very local. And what came back was very impressive. I thought, retailer recommendations, price context, even notes about availability in specific areas. And the brands and retailers that showed up had really structured, accurate, findable data. And much like the other two searches as well, the brands that didn't come up or the retailers that didn't come up, either their data wasn't clean enough for AI to read or they just simply didn't have the digital presence to even surface in that kind of specific search. Now, three very different search examples there, three very different product categories, but one outcome. And that was that I was only ever shown brands and retailers that AI could find, verify, and feel confident recommending. And everything else was just invisible to me in that search environment. And, in each case, I was a real motivated buyer who was ready to make a decision. That is the landscape that all of our brands are operating in right now. And it's about to get a lot more significant because 3 weeks ago, Shopify essentially flipped a switch. And honestly, the lack of collective screaming from the e-commerce world kind of tells me that a lot of brand founders still either haven't clocked what just happened or perhaps think that they don't have to do anything to take advantage of it. But the switch that was flipped on the 24th of March was that every eligible Shopify store is now discoverable inside ChatGPT. We don't have to install an app. There's no integration to build, no ad budget required. Your products are just essentially in the catalog by default, as long as they are available to purchase in the US. Doesn't mean you have to sell to the US. And at the moment, ChatGPT has 880 million active users. So your products could potentially be in front of that volume of potential customers. But this, the part that I really want you to sit with is that being in the catalog is not the same as being recommended to people doing the kind of searches that I was doing. ChatGPT doesn't hand shoppers a directory and say, good luck, Godspeed. It recommends. And so when someone types something in, like what's the best collagen supplement for gut health, or which premium skincare brand is actually effective and worth the money, it's going to pick winners and it will make a judgment call. And the way it picks those winners is similar to the way that Google has always done it, using authority signals, relevant content, and a digital footprint it can actually read, cite, and trust. So if you think of it this way, your products are now sitting in a catalogue alongside millions of products from millions of other brands. I mean, that's not a distribution win, that's a starting position. The brands that actually get recommended are the ones that have done the work to look like the obvious, credible answers in their category. The ones that haven't, I mean, their products are in that catalogue the way a resume might sit in a pile of 500 uh, applying for a position. Technically present, but practically invisible. For Australian and New Zealand brands, which is largely my audience for this show, it's worth understanding exactly what this means for you. So the ChatGPT kind of agentic storefront, if you want to call it that, where your products can be discovered and customers can, if they discover your products via ChatGPT, they would then complete their purchase on your Shopify store. This is available to brands, like I said earlier, that are able to sell or available to sell in the US market. So this means that discovery is on the table, but this discovery has to be earned. And so here's the number that I think makes this hopefully feel really urgent to all of you. I mean, it does to me. AI referred traffic to Shopify stores is already up 7 times in the last year. And AI attributed orders are up 11 times. And shoppers arriving via AI recommendations convert at 9 times the rate of shoppers coming from social media referrals. I mean, that's enormous, right? Given the cost of paid traffic right now, and not to mention the state of the economy that we're living in right now, this isn't a trend that I think any of us can afford to watch from a safe distance. This is a compounding advantage being built right now by the brands that have started this work, and a compounding disadvantage accumulating for the ones that haven't. Now, I'd like to touch on why I think this matters even more for the kinds of brands that my team and I work with, which are your premium brands, the founder-led brands, the artisan and sustainable brands, and specifically what it means for 2 scenarios that I see all the time. And the first is a brand that's investing seriously in paid advertising, Meta ads, Google ads, often both. The ads are running, the creative is good. Maybe you've got a consistent kind of pipeline or schedule where you're updating these things, and you're on top of optimizing and et cetera, but the ROAS is kind of marginal. And every time these brands try to scale the budget, the economics just fall apart. And here's what's almost always happening in that scenario. It's often not what most people think about either. Premium buyers are considered buyers. They do not impulse purchase from an ad alone. When a quality conscious customer sees your ad on Meta, even, the most beautiful ad with genuinely compelling copy that is super relevant to that viewer, her very next move is almost never to just go and click buy now. Her next move is going to be to verify, and she's going to be Googling your brand. She's going to be searching your product category on other platforms, whether it's TikTok or Pinterest or, Reddit even, and she's going to be doing things like asking ChatGPT whether your brand is worth it. And essentially what she's looking for is anyone else talking about you. It's, looking for a review, a recommendation, a mention somewhere else credible. And she's trying to build a case for trust before she hands over her credit card details to you. And that's not going to happen just because you, the brand owner, or the brand itself is, out there publishing just loads more content about yourself, right? If your brand only exists in your own paid ad campaigns and your own branded content, if there's no kind of organic footprint around it, no search presence, no AI citations, no community conversation, then your ads are doing, attempting to do all of that trust building work alone. That is not what they were designed to do. And that's why your cost per acquisition keeps creeping up and new creative doesn't move the needle the way that it should. The second scenario is a brand that has been building organically. And in this case, they've got a warm email list, a social following that engages, steady orders from customers that genuinely love. But the revenue has plateaued and it's been kind of stubbornly flat for some time. And no matter how much they post or how many reels they make or how consistent they are with emailing or any of the other stuff, the ceiling just doesn't move. And that ceiling is almost always a discovery problem, not necessarily a content quality problem. It's more of a structural problem. And so these brands have basically marketed to their existing warm audience until the returns diminished. And they haven't built genuine new discovery channels to bring in people who've never heard of them. And, they're doing things like posting to the room that they are already in, but they're completely invisible to everyone outside it. I've actually seen this scenario a lot with older brands, brands that have been around for 10 plus years who historically you were advertising a lot more, but have stopped advertising either entirely or in the majority because the returns from those ads just weren't, they just don't work the same as 10 years ago, like, let's face it. And so they've spent the last couple of years just essentially marketing to their existing audience. And that, it's like if you imagine your existing customer base as a wet sponge, and the more you squeeze out of it, the drier that sponge gets. If you're not replenishing it with fresh customers or fresh potential customers, then eventually you're going to squeeze the entire customer base dry. Anywho, oh gosh, while I'm on the topic of the customer, let's talk about where she actually is right now, because your customers haven't stopped spending entirely. I know there's the temptation to feel like that when we're all, feeling the pinch with massively high interest rates and petrol costs and all of that and frustrating cost of living stuff. But, historically, women didn't survive a cost of living crisis by accident. They survived it by just getting really good at knowing exactly what's worth it. So they're still buying, often pretty enthusiastically, and occasionally on things that might require a very creative explanation on the bank statement. But they're doing far more research before they commit. They are asking AI assistants for recommendations. They're validating on Reddit and TikTok before they click anything. They're arriving at your product page having already formed a view about whether your brand deserves their money before they've even properly met you/your brand. The paid traffic platforms will tell you that the solution is to spend more. I mean, of course they will. It's like the pit boss always backs another hand. The brands actually winning right now, though, are outthinking the competition rather than outspending them. So let me walk you through what I see as the three discovery gaps. And there are three questions that will tell you very quickly where your biggest opportunity sits for your brand. And the first one is, are you actually findable? If your ideal customer searched your product category right now, whether it's on Google, on TikTok, on Pinterest, or by asking ChatGPT, would your brand appear? Because search in 2026 isn't just Google. Your search, your ideal customer is searching everywhere. Even the way social media works now is informing search, right? So on TikTok for product recommendations, it could be, is this actually worth it content? Or on Pinterest for curated ideas in homewares and fashion and wellness. On Google for category questions and comparisons and brand validation. On Instagram's increasingly used search bar and through AI assistants, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, etc., which are now being asked directly for product recommendations as well. If you're not appearing in any of those searches, you simply don't exist for the buyers who discover brands that way, and a growing proportion of premium buyers discover brands exactly that way. Most brands that I work with are visible to the people who already know them and essentially invisible to everyone else. And that's the gap, and it is a growing one. The second question that you want to ask is, when people find you, is your product page doing its job? And this is one that can often surprise people because it's the gap that they're least likely to see from the inside. So if your ROAS is dropping on, as you scale your meta ads, or your conversion rate is stubbornly lower than it should be, the instinct is almost always to blame the ads. And I get it, because they're expensive. So people are looking at the audiences or the creative, or they're, blaming the algorithm, which, let's face it, the algorithm deserves some blame when it changes all the time, but can't control any of that. And sometimes these things are true, but often it's the traffic is actually fine and the page is the problem itself, or at least a big part of the problem. So your product pages are, if you've been around for some time, your product pages were almost certainly built when launched your business, when you did the last website upgrade, redesign. Um, and typically, the product pages that we see are whatever was in the theme template. They were designed by people working on the desktop only version of the website, often quickly with an eye on just getting, the store live. And sure, with genuine love for the product, but not nearly enough thought about the psychology of the complete stranger who's about to read said page for the first time. And totally normal, by the way, to have come about creating your web pages like that, but it can also be a real conversion killer. Because that stranger, particularly somebody who's shopping for a premium or quality brand, is running through a bit of a mental checklist when she arrives. And it's usually unconscious. I mean, I spend hours dissecting this stuff because it's my job, but most shoppers don't. They're not thinking about why they make these decisions or how they go about making these decisions, but unconsciously or subconsciously, they're thinking things like, is this brand legitimate? Does this work for someone like me with my specific situation? What's the thing I'm not seeing yet? Is the price fair for what I'm actually getting? What happens if it doesn't work? And loads more, hyper specific mental questions that people ask about, different product categories. Bottom line is, if your product page doesn't answer whatever questions your ideal customer is asking, and clearly and in the right order and in language that actually resonates with her, she's going to close the tab and keep looking. Not because she didn't want the product, but because she just didn't get the reassurance that she needed to feel confident enough to buy. So a quick exercise that you could do is to pull up your highest traffic product page and try and read it as a complete stranger, particularly if you are arriving from an ad and you know nothing about the founder or the story or the brand or anything, and write down every question a skeptical first-time visitor might have that isn't answered anywhere on that page. And that list is going to be your first starting point for how to optimize the page. There's certainly a lot more very specific research and process that we go through to get even better quality content on that page, but that's going to be your starting point. The third question you want to ask yourself is, are you building new discovery or are you marketing on repeat? And this is the warm audience ceiling question, and it's potentially the sneakiest of the three because, the business can look completely fine from the outside and looking like they're doing all of the right things. And meanwhile, the growth engine is quietly stalled. So if your social content specifically is built for the people who already follow you or know you, and that kind of content might include brand updates or product features or behind the scenes type stuff, that kind of content is good, and it's not like you shouldn't do it, but it's doing almost nothing to bring new people in. Essentially, that kind of content is only going to be appealing to your existing audience, right? It's like you're broadcasting to a room that isn't getting any bigger. The shift that can break this ceiling is from moving content from broadcast to discovery and creating content that actually is likely to get found by people who've actually never heard of you. Content that's built around the actual language your ideal customer types into a search bar and not the language that you use internally to describe your products. These are very, very different things. And this shift compounds. 6 to 12 months of really consistent discovery-focused content creates an inbound channel that keeps working whether you're actively posting that day or not. And it's one of the few genuine assets that I believe that you can build in marketing right now, and it will be the thing that finally breaks that ceiling for you. Now, I want to paint you a picture of what actually changes in your business when this kind of discoverability is working, because I think it's really easy to hear AI visibility and file it under, marketing trend to keep an eye on. It's not that. It's a business performance lever with really real commercial implications. The first being that your paid advertising gets dramatically more efficient because when a considered buyer sees your ad, her next move is going to be to verify. And if she searches your brand and finds credible signals like content and citations and reviews and, an AI recommendation, the ad click is more likely to convert. If she finds nothing, it's way less likely to convert. So that would be the same ad, the same creative, the same spend, but completely different outcome depending on whether the organic ecosystem is there to help catch her. And this is why, one of the reasons why ROAS drops at scale often aren't creative problems. It's about that trust infrastructure. And it's why you end up exhausting a small, warm audience that already knows you. And then, when you start reaching for cold people who go looking for the reassurance and find nothing. So building the discovery layer is what makes paid advertising scale much more efficiently without the economics falling apart. Imagine your current ad spend potentially working at 30 to 40% better efficiency, not because you necessarily changed any of the ad creatives or the setup of the campaigns, but because the people clicking through are arriving already partially convinced. The second outcome that changes is that your conversion rate improves without touching the ads. So a visitor who has encountered your brand when doing that verification search, so they might have encountered your brand in an AI recommendation or a TikTok search result, or wherever, her favorite platform is to go to before she clicks on your ad is not the same visitor as someone just encountering your ad cold. So she arrives warmer, more predisposed to trust, further along in her decision making, and the product page then has a much, much, much easier job. And as the organic discovery presence builds, the overall quality of your traffic improves, and the people finding you organically are actively searching for what you sell. So high intent and low resistance. And those visitors convert at a dramatically higher rate than cold ad traffic. So you're not just getting more traffic, you're getting better traffic. And then the third really interesting outcome that happens is that your customer lifetime value quietly increases. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't see coming or maybe don't notice it. It's a bit like that thing where, perhaps as a parent, you sort of don't really see your young children changing on a daily basis, but the grandparent who hasn't seen them for a month notices a huge difference. But this can actually be one of the most significant outcomes of all, and that is when a customer finds your brand through genuine authority content, whether that is an article that actually helped her or a recommendation that felt trustworthy or an AI citation that positioned you as the expert in your category, or all three, she's arriving with a fundamentally different relationship to your brand, and she's bought into the authority and not just the product. That customer comes back more often, buys more across your range, and is significantly more likely to become an advocate. Contrast that with the discount-driven buyer who arrived because of maybe a price incentive and whose loyalty is entirely conditional on the next price incentive. Same product, same store, but very different long-term economics depending on how that customer first found you. When your brand has genuine authority in its category, through things like AI recommending you, when your content gets found and shared, when your customers feel they discovered something rather than just bought something or felt sold to. The other cool thing that happens is word of mouth kicks in at a completely different rate. So then your customers are not just recommending a product, they're recommending a brand that they feel smart for having found. And that's a flywheel that replaces the hamster wheel. Instead of spending more every month to maintain the same revenue, you're building assets that generate compounding returns over time. All of this, better ROAS, higher conversion rates, improved lifetime value, organic word of mouth, All of this is the commercial case for what is ultimately a positioning and content decision. The brands winning right now aren't necessarily outspending anyone. They've made themselves the obvious answer across every place their customer is looking. And they did it before their competitors realized this whole online e-commerce game had changed. So what do you actually do with all of this? The first thing is you want to resist the urge to fix everything all at once, which for some of you is going to be a massive relief because it can feel super overwhelming. But those of you who might be the type A's of the world, or like me, who I refer to myself as a recovering type A, I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but honestly, trying to simultaneously overhaul the whole lot, your discovery strategy, rebuild your product pages, structure your content calendar, etc., etc. It just means you generate a lot of activity with very little useful data. So you really need to identify your primary bottleneck first and then address that first. Everything else can kind of wait and be sequential. So if your biggest gap is discovery, you want to focus on 2 or 3 channels where your ideal customer is actively searching. So for premium brands, that's going to be Google through blog content and product page optimization, TikTok or Pinterest, depending on your category, and AI visibility, which comes as a natural byproduct of building genuine authority content. So you don't need to be everywhere. You need to be somewhere consistently and doing it with content that actually earns trust. If your biggest gap is conversion, definitely start with your product pages and do the stranger test, pull up your highest traffic page and read it as if you were someone who'd never heard of your brand, or get somebody else who actually doesn't know your brand to do this and observe them. Write down the questions that aren't answered, build the FAQ that your customers actually need. Bring specific story-driven social proof higher on the page and make the value case so clearly that the price feels like an easy decision rather than a sacrifice. And then if your biggest gap is the warm audience ceiling, you want to be shifting from broadcast to discovery content as your starting point. And it takes, unfortunately, 6 to 12 months to compound meaningfully, which is exactly why starting now really, really matters. It's like that saying, I don't know if you've heard it, if you want shade, when's the best time to plant a tree? Probably 20 years ago, but when's the second best time? Today. So every month that you wait is a month of compounding that you don't get back. Now, I've covered a lot today, starting off with, this new move by Shopify with ChatGPT. If you want to work through which of these is your primary bottleneck and what the specific moves would actually look like for your brand with me, that's exactly what our brand growth discovery sessions is for. It's a really frank conversation. I'm not going to bore you to death with death by PowerPoint, and I'm not going to just go through a generic list of advice or anything like that. It will be very specific, looking at your brand with you and identifying what would genuinely move the needle. So if you want to book in one of those, just head to our website, Productpreneur Marketing, and the Let's Talk link is in the menu. But aside from that, that is it for today's episode. If it has been useful, please share it, be generous, share it with another brand founder who really needs this information. And as usual, I look forward to being back in your ears again this time next week. Bye for now.